Breaking aviation news.
Good afternoon and welcome to Vertical Aviation News Network. This is your captain speaking. Sorry that we're having technical difficult issues with our connection. Delayed us coming live and we're a little late. But as always, I'll give my disclaimer. This is everything I discuss in this video will be speculation until official reports are released by NTSB. Today, our discussion is about the Delta crash in Toronto that overturned on the runway. It was a CRJ 900, had a total of 80 people on board, 76 passengers and 4 crew members. What we know so far is that it was icy conditions and the aircraft was coming into land. Winds were gusting. I haven't gotten the exact time that I haven't gotten the exact wind direction and the speed of the gust. I do know they were gusting above 30 knots. Typically, when you have wind gusts, this is our concern in any aircraft that's landing with a crosswind, which they were landing with a crosswind. And what that means is the aircraft is going in one direction and the wind is coming in perpendicular to the angle of the aircraft. So they had a crosswind as they were landing. When they landed, it is believed that the right wing actually touched the ground, and when it touched the ground, that caused the right wing to actually break off, and it continued to roll, and it rolled over and began to skid down the runway. Now on the CRJ series aircraft, fuel is in the wings. So once that wing broke off, fuel began to spill onto the runway and onto the aircraft. Thankfully, because it was icing conditions and it was very cold, even with the aircraft skidding down the runway, it didn't get hot enough to ignite that fuel. I think the icing conditions actually is what made this crash survivable and not become a real disaster, a real major disaster. 17 people were injured. Thankfully, they were not. They did not get. They did not get seriously injured where they were deceased. I think there is an infant that did get seriously injured that they had to airlift, and then everyone else that was injured, they were able to take them to hospitals via ambulance or ground transportation in non-life-threatening condition. So what I'll do is kind of talk and discuss going through what it's like landing an airplane or any aircraft in a crosswind condition. So typically, ideal conditions for all aircraft landing, we want to land into the wind, meaning the wind is going head on with the aircraft. And when there's a crosswind, it's different. The wind is going at the aircraft at an angle. So when you're coming in for crosswind landings, typically the pilot will turn or crab, as we say, we would crab into the wind, meaning they would apply pressure to the pedals to turn the aircraft into the direction of the crosswind until they get ready to touch down. And then just before touchdown, they will straighten it back up and align with the runway. Now, when they're doing that and there's gust wind, it makes it a little bit more challenging. And typically, if you've flown commercially and ever landed when there's heavy winds, people, you will feel the aircraft kind of rocking side to side. That's the pilot trying to compensate for the wind and trying to level the wings based on the speed of those winds that are possibly a crosswind. In this instance, they had a very strong crosswind, and at the same time, they had gust. Now, gust means that it will just suddenly burst to a higher speed of wind. In this case, they said they were gusting in excess of 30 knots. That's a pretty strong crosswind, even for big aircraft. That's a strong crosswind. When it gusts at that speed, and particularly it's above that, it will cause the aircraft to wobble excessively because the pilot can't compensate quick enough to compensate for that. Now, autopilot and things like that will aid in that, but it's very unpredictable because the speeds are not consistent. So when the gust happened, they were probably close enough to the ground, and at the same time, the pilot was probably compensating already to the right, with a right, what we would say right wing low. And the gusts most likely happened at the same time, which means that burst of sudden wind happened at the same time and probably lifted the left wing and caused the right wing to contact the ground. That is my assessment based on the information that has been released from NTSB. That is what caused that wing to touch the ground on the right side, subsequently ripping the wing off, and it continued to roll. It had enough momentum to continue to roll over, and it rolled over on the top of the aircraft and continued to skid down the runway. This is also a chance to talk about safety of making sure you always wear your seatbelt until they tell you it's okay to unbuckle. This is why that is so important that you keep your seatbelt on until the aircraft has come to a stop, as they always say. They always iterate that just prior to landing. So, take this to heart. That is why you do it. So when they instruct you, please do not remove those seatbelts until that aircraft has came to a stop at its gate. This is because everyone did actually wear their seatbelts. This is why it wasn't any fatalities and no injuries that were, life-threatening, with the exception of the small child. We haven't gotten the details on that, but I'm probably guessing that the small child was either what they call a lap child, meaning they were being held in someone's lap, or they were just a small child in a seat, and the force was just a little bit more rough on their body because of the nature of the accident. NTSB is on site. They're going to obviously conduct their investigation, and as more information becomes available, we will give an update to that. Moving on to our second story, which is our update on the helicopter and the collision in DC. More information was released on that. We did find out that the Black Hawk helicopter did actually have cockpit voice recorders. They did recover those, and they have gotten all the radio transmissions off of there. And what we know, they were flying under MVGs. They were also conducting a check ride on the pilot that was on the controls. There was discrepancies between their radar altimeters that they never discussed, that will probably become a factor later on. Even though they were still too high, there was a instrument indication error between the two indicators between the pilot and co-pilot. The instrumentation for altitude for the radar altimeters there was a difference greater than what's allowed. There is allowable difference, and I think it was outside of those parameters. We also know that that they did not, that certain transmissions were not heard because they were not heard on the cockpit voice recorder in the cockpit, because at the same time that the tower was giving them instructions or telling them about the CRJ, the pilot was keying the mic, which means they pressed the button in order to talk to air traffic control. And once that happens, you cannot hear what air traffic control is actually saying to you, because you are pressing the mic and it's blocking their transmission. So those details were just released here just on Monday, and those are major factors that will factor into this. But the main thing is they were too high. They were supposed to be 200 feet and below, but they were still flying at 300 feet. The fact that there was not a fourth crew member is a major factor, because I think that fourth crew member would have been on the other side of the aircraft and probably would have been able to alert someone that there was another aircraft. Also, NTSB also said that they can confirm that they were under NVGs because there wasn't a discussion about going unaided. What the NTSB is talking about is when we as pilots, in the military particularly, we are taught that you have a positive three-way change of controls, or anything that you're going to change in the cockpit, or anything related to changing the conditions of your flight, you do it with what we call positive three-way communication. So if they were going to go unaided, which means they were going to turn the NVGs off, they would talk to each other and say, we're going to go unaided. And then the co-pilot would confirm that by saying, going unaided. And then also the crew chief in the back would also confirm that back as well, that they all understand that they're going to go unaided, which means they would be turning off their NVGs. NTSB said there was not a discussion about that, so they're saying that the NVGs were still on. And I would concur with the NTSB that yes, most probably, if they did not have that positive three-way communication that they were going to go unaided, then that means they were still flying what's called an aided flight with the NVGs. So as more information become available, we will continue to update you, as I said. And now we're going on to our aircraft of the week. Aircraft of the week for this week is a 1990 Bell 206 L3. It has a total time of 9,800. Registration number is November 996 Alfa Romeo. It's asking price of $1 million US. It's a beautiful aircraft. It is being sold by ARH Aviation, and you can reach them at area code 479-487-0595. And once again, thank you for joining the Vertical Aviation News Network. This has been your captain speaking, and as always, safe travels.